Hello, I'm Aisling and welcome to Zevo Talks, a new podcast where I get to chat to risk takers, thought leaders and great people making change. So we're continuing on with our discussion on wellness. This week we're going to be talking about mental health. Ireland has one of the highest rates of mental health illnesses in Europe, with 18.5% of the Irish population recorded as having a mental health disorder. Along with this number, there are those who are still suffering in silence. Today we are joined by Shane Carthy, Dublin football player who's breaking the stigma surrounding mental health in the Irish GAA scene and the wider community. Thanks so much for joining us today, Shane.
Thanks very much for having me in.
So you have talked very openly about your story, and it's something that's very inspiring, and it's a huge benefit to Ireland, a country that is struggling to understand the importance of talking about mental health. I think we're a country of talkers, but we don't talk about how we feel.
Yeah.
So could you first start by talking about your story a little bit and telling us a bit about it?
Yeah, so I'll bring it straight back to kind of my primary school days, where it all would have started for me in Portmarnock, where I grew up and still live to this day. I have three sisters, and both my mum and dad, and they were hugely supportive of all of us. And you know, one thing in particular that they threw us into was sport. And that was no different for me. You know, I took up Gaelic, soccer, hurling, you name it. And add to that, I guess, from a very young age, I was relatively talented at anything that I threw my hand at. And straight away, you know, from a young age, just put me up in a pedestal, this kind of limelight figure that I didn't want to be on. I really, really enjoyed all types of sports and being okay at them, you know. But I didn't want to be this kind of pedestal-like figure. But nonetheless, because of my talent in these sports, that's where I found myself, you know. So from a very young age, that's where I started off. So my transition then into secondary school was seamless. Like, you know, it would have been a thing for a lot of people. It's a very difficult transition, you know, going from primary to secondary, a new change of scenery, new kind of group around you. And because of my popularity amongst friends, mainly through sport, you know, it was seamless for me. And I would have continued along the trend of playing all types of sport, in particular Gaelic football. And I would have been involved in the Dublin teams right the way up, in development teams, all the way up until under 16s, where there comes a point then you need to kind of choose. I was whittled down to Gaelic and soccer at that time, both playing at a very, very high level. And my decision was obviously to go with Gaelic football. So that's where my kind of Gaelic football career would have really started, I guess, at a minor grade. And it would have been where I met a man who was very, very pivotal in my story today, in the shape of Desi Farrell. He was our minor manager at the time, and you know, he gave me my first shot at a real kind of Dublin career. And fast forward, and then, you know, it would have brought me into the middle of fifth year. It would have been what would have been my second year of minor football, and it would have been the start of, you know, what I didn't know then, what I now know was depression. And I would have went through that cycle for 2 years. 2 years on my own, completely within myself, and from friends, family, teammates, and you name it. Like I kept it within myself, because I go back to the kind of the pedestal-like figure. And especially when, you know, you're out in the public eye, and you know, people see you as this idyllic figure living a great life in front of 82,500 people every couple of weeks in Croke Park. You know, I just thought that I had to keep this in, and I should have been living an idyllic life, but I wasn't. I couldn't make sense of it in my head, and the things kind of gradually got worse. So much so that coming to the end of the 2 years, that unfortunately had thoughts of dying by suicide. And again, this was a hugely scary thing. I didn't want to feel this way, but I couldn't get away from that kind of thought that was inevitably in my head nearly every single day coming towards the end of the 2 years. So that would have brought me into then what had transpired. Then I would have went in and had a panic attack and went in St. Patrick's Mental Hospital, where I'd spent 11 weeks, 11 very, very tough weeks, but a huge turning point in my life and where I am today. And I guess, you know, long story short, fast forward in 5 years now, nearly 6 years, that I've come out the other side, and I've, as you said, you know, spoken quite publicly about it, on all different types of platforms. And it's just a thing for me that whatever I went through, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. And I vouch that every single day, and that's why I speak about it publicly. And that's why, you know, this pedestal-like figure that was seen so many years ago and still to this day, I can capitalize on that kind of in a positive manner, in terms of like, look, I'm this guy as you still see up in this pedestal, even though I'm not, but some people see me in that shape, that, you know, I can say, look, I'm going through a difficult time, you know, so can you. And that's the kind of even keel that I want to put it on. So that's kind of in a short, condensed period, I would say, as best I can. That's the journey of my story.
And the 2 years that you said you were kind of suffering in silence, you weren't speaking about how you were feeling. Was there a change in your mood, like towards your family and your friends? Did they notice anything that was a bit different, or?
No, I guess from the start, you know, as I said, it was quite, you know, sporadic at the start in terms of how I was feeling when I was feeling down. And my escape, my kind of cope mechanism at that time inevitably was football. And that was what kept me going. And the fear of actually letting someone in and letting them know exactly what was going on for me, you know, drove me to kind of put up this poker face, this mask, and, you know, keep it within myself. So right to the very end, nearly, you know, a year and a half, 2 years on, it was only towards the very end that, you know, I began to show cracks, and cracks began to appear. The poker face and the mask wasn't as strong as it once was.
And was it a fear of judgment? Because often in like the stigma, I guess, surrounding men's mental health especially is that, you know, they're told to man up, and
Yeah.
and they feel like maybe they can't talk about their feelings. Was it a fear of judgment, or and like how did you go from that kind of fear to then talking about it so openly, and not having a fear about talking about it?
I guess when you say why I maybe kept it in, was that exact thing of judgment. You know, as I said, I was perceived to be living this idyllic life, and quite frankly, I was living a very good life. I was popular amongst friends. I was, as I said, you know, involved in the Dublin setup, and things in my life, you know, gradually was on an upward curve. But little did people know internally, I was crumbling. And, you know, the conversation that I was having with myself, the internal dialogue that, you know, I'm I I should be living this idyllic life. People are seeing this, but I'm in reality I'm not. And, you know, I would have said, like, if I would have said to someone, you know, I'm going through a really, really difficult time, this is what's going on for me, I would have said, look, you're lying. You know, if I was the outside looking in, I would have thought people said I was lying. So that fear factor of that judgment, and especially, as you said, with males in particular, when I'm in a masculine setting, you know, nearly every second day with 30 plus players in the dressing room, if I came out and said, look, I'm going through a really difficult time, I just thought it was going to be laughed at, and that was the reality of what I was facing, you know.
Yeah. And you said then you had your panic attack, and you woke up in PATS, and you were there for 11 weeks. What was the support like afterwards that you received?
Yeah, so it particularly in St. Pat's, you know, it was the thing of no one actually knew that I was in there for the first couple of weeks, and I was still toying with the fact, because I was in a very, very busy under-21 championship campaign with the Dublin footballers, and it would have been just after the Leinster final. I would have been awarded man of the match, and in between that time of the Leinster final, the All-Ireland semi-final, which would have been our next match, the panic attack had ensued, and I'd went in St. Pat's, as you said, and it would have been a kind of couple of weeks there where I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to be here for too long. I might be able to come out and, you know, play the All-Ireland semi-final. And it was only when I started really dealing and facing up to the stuff that I had subsided for so many years that, you know, I very quickly realised, like, this is not a quick fix. And it was then thinking of, okay, the media were then asking, I didn't play the All-Ireland semi-final, which we went ahead and won. And they were saying, look, will Shane Carthy be back? Why wasn't he playing today? And Desi had used a line initially that, you know, I picked up a knock in the Leinster final, and that's why I wasn't there. And as I said, after the semi-final, I'd asked Desi to come back into the hospital, and I said, look, I want you to go public with this. I don't want any more lies. I don't want you to make excuses for what I'm really going through at this particular point. And as I said, I realised the lucky position that I'm in, that so many people look up to me, you know, in what I do in my life, that I can have a positive effect. And, you know, it was a massive weight off my shoulders when I had said to Desi. It wasn't an easy decision. I sat on it for a couple of days, you know, thinking internally, like, the pros and cons. And obviously I came out and asked Desi to announce it publicly, and I was absolutely taken aback. It was only when I came out of St. Pat's, because I was out of touch with social media and everything, I closed myself off from that. I was only there after the 11 weeks in St. Pat's that I was absolutely amazed, like, as in people of all ages come up to me on the streets and message me on Instagram, Twitter, whatever it may be, saying how brave I was and how much I've helped them. And, you know, and that's what I'm saying, you know, I went through the deepest and darkest time in my life, and I'm hopefully, you know, helping people not get to that point in their life, because I've spoken about it and normalises somewhat in people's lives.
Yeah, I don't think we realise kind of the amount of people who are probably suffering in silence and who don't speak about it. So yeah, I think that's extremely brave and a great move to come out about it publicly and not keep a lie going on, I guess. Was there any negative setbacks when you came out about it publicly? Like, did anyone kind of dismiss it, or?
I guess when I really kind of I obviously came out public with it initially in 2014, and 2015 would have been where I would have started doing my first kind of public speaking events and kind of really coming out with it quite publicly. That naturally enough, as you know, social media, so many positives to it, but also has its negatives. That I did get a bit of I would say hatred, or I would say negative comments, just to keep it in the best possible terms. There was, and you know, I had to realise that I was putting myself out, but I knew for every, you know, one negative comment there was 99 positives to go with that, you know. So I just quashed it away, and I didn't pay much attention to it. You know, as I said, these last 5-6 years I've been, you know, 99% of the positive comments have been absolutely mind-blowing. And you know, there is obviously going to be that negative kind of perception out in the public from whoever it is, and that's absolutely fine. I've come to realise that within even the footballing world as well, I'm quite used to that side of things. So I just look at it as upon, you know, I'm helping so many people that I can just ignore the negative perception of the public.
And so did you start then by talking about it first on social media, and then the public speaking, and then you wrote your blog post, was it last year?
Yes, yeah. So I would have then had my first public speaking event. I would have came out at St. Pat's in August 2014, and it would have been the January of 2015 that I would have had my first public speaking event. In between that time, I'd posted for World Mental Health Day and different bits and pieces, but nothing too much. So it would have been very much the first time that the public really would have heard my full story. And the whole thing was that, you know, that had transpired. I come out and done a couple of newspaper interviews and radio interviews and whatnot. And then, as I said, it came to the period of when I was deciding to write the blog. So I just last year I graduated from DCU in my undergraduate, which was in sports science, and I was always planning to take a year out. And I was thinking, you know, I've seen people taking a year out and get quite lazy in their ways, and I didn't want to be like that. Obviously, I had sport there, but I was thinking, what else matters to me in my life? And obviously, that was mental health. And I was thinking, how can I actually capitalise in this year that I can get my message further afield? You know, I'm doing these talks in certain areas within the country to a certain amount of people at a certain time, so it's quite limited in terms of who I can reach out to. So I was thinking, mental health, everyone's on social media, everyone's a click of away from anything at all on social media. So I was thinking, I'm going to write a blog here, and it was a couple of months in the making. I had a bit of a help with my good buddy of mine in Texaco service station, where he was actually where I work still. I'd met him there, I've stayed friends with him, and he's a former journalist as well. So I was just bouncing ideas off him. I drafted up a couple of drafts, and we went back and forth. And once I was happy with it, I decided to then publish. I think it was December 19th, just last year, was when I click publish, and that was I was apprehensive to be quite honest, because as I said, I knew the reach, or I hoped that, you know, it would get the reach that it inevitably did, and I was absolutely blown away by the reach that it did get. But I knew, because it was out there in the public field, I guess, that it was out there to be, you know, again, those positive and negatives, and people, you know, from social media aspect, they're more inclined to maybe speak their feelings, I guess. So I knew I was putting myself out there yet again, but I was very, very happy to do so when I looked in the overall context of it.
And in your blog post, you spoke about your sister, was in Sweden?
Yes.
And kind of, was she the first person that you kind of mentioned that something was going on to?
Yeah, so I would have been actually, so you know, my old sister, the reason why I maybe would have confided in her a bit more than I did with my other two sisters, just her being the eldest. And you know, and the thing was, just before I went over to her, I had broken down in front of my mum and dad, and I'd said to them, look, I'm going through a really, really difficult time here. I couldn't make sense of it in my head. I didn't know what to say. I just had to say it. And I think they were seeing signs, they were seeing cracks begin to appear over the last couple of months previous to me telling them. And as I said, their then next step was, you know, whatever I was perceived to be hiding, that what they thought I was hiding, I go over to my sister in Stockholm just after the Leinster final, and maybe shed some light on what was going on for me. So it would be my mum and dad firstly, and then it would have been my sister. But I met her with the same news that I met with my mum and dad. There wasn't anything I was hiding. I didn't know what was going on. It was a massive cloudiness in my head that I couldn't make sense of. So, you know, I'd confided in her. as much as I did with my mum and dad, and that's where it spiraled then into going to the St. Pat's thereafter.
When you went to St. Pat's, did they say that you are depressed or you're suffering with depression? How was that for you to kind of hear?
I guess it was a massive relief, I guess. When I was finally able to make sense of it. So I had a very, very busy couple of days. I met doctors, I met psychologists, I'd met nurses, whoever else it may be, and having conversations around what was really going on for me in the previous couple of years to this, and making sense of it. And I guess it was a difficult thing to hear, that you're depressed, because I would have had that stigma around it, being labelled, there's the guy with depression. That's what I initially had thought. But when I really thought about it, I was like, there's a massive relief that I'm eventually tackling this and actually able to make sense of some of the thoughts and feelings that I couldn't make sense of for 2 years. So I guess initially there was that kind of, I've just been labelled of depression, and I would have had that negative stigma behind it. But then when I started educating myself around really what was going on for me and mental health in general, I then, it was that I took away that stigma that was attached to me at the time, and was able to become a lot more comfortable with it, and obviously thereafter come out publicly with it.
And if you were to have maybe a bad day or a bad week, what would your coping mechanisms be?
Yeah, so that was obviously one of the things that I would have been able to learn. So the whole integration back into society, and how I deal with when I have a good or bad day. And I used to have my good and bad days right up to today. I wouldn't shy away from the fact of that. And as I said, I would actually refer to it as like my toolbox. I would have built up my toolbox and still learn things that work for me, what doesn't, whatever else it may be. And obviously top of the list is obviously physical exercise. I've spoken about it quite often, that physical exercise, the happy endorphins that you release after a walk, a swim, a match, or whatever else it may be. But then away from that, I started building my toolbox. I was thinking, I can't always rely on physical exercise. Sometimes I will just have to give my body a rest. So it would be something less strenuous, like a meal out with my friends, going to the cinema, playing a bit of pool with my friends, or going for a walk, listening to a podcast, doing a bit of CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, all these different things, which is less strenuous on the body, but also giving me some sort of relief when I am having these bad days. So I've just essentially, my thoughts may not have changed. They've obviously subsided somewhat in terms of the severity of them, but I'm better able to manage them because I have all these tools. I have the education around what works for me, what doesn't. So those would be the kind of tools that I've still building on to this day. I've learned so much about myself over the last 5-6 years after coming out of St. Pat's. So it's ever growing, I guess.
And when you were added to Jim Gavin's Dublin team in 2013, do you think that the pressure of playing had an effect on your mental health, or was it the opposite? Was it a release to play, or a bit of both, maybe?
I guess it was a bit of both. It would have been, I only would have been 18 years of age. I was still in school, I talked to the lads, only very recently I was talking to Kevin McMenamin about it, another Dublin senior footballer, and he was joking, I remember all those years back that, when you were sitting there in the dressing room, or we had a gym session in the morning, we showered up and we're going off to work or whatever, you were there in your school uniform, so it was a very strange thing for them. And I guess it would have been that thing of, I was 18 years of age, I was still in school, and people were coming to me when I was going into school. I was like, oh, where are we this morning? So I was just training with Dublin senior footballers, and it was a release for me. That training was always a release. It never would have been a pressurized environment. But I guess the pressure then of seeing the reaction of people. So I would have went into school and people would have been like, oh, he's just training with Dublin senior footballers there. And that pressure of having to keep up that mask, that poker face, because as I said, the upward curve that my life was perceived to be going on grew even bigger as I was involved, and luckily involved in 2013 and thereafter,
Yeah, you had to be happy all of the time, essentially, going into school, and
exactly,
and
sure.
you couldn't be in a bad mood.
Yeah, what did I have to be sad about? That's what people would have been thinking from the outside.
So as a country, we've made fantastic steps in introducing the topic of mental health, but we obviously have a lot more to do. Where do you see the future in mental health in Ireland going, and what changes do you think still need to happen?
Well, I guess where I'd love for it to be going is obviously the conversation becomes a lot more normalised. As you said, we've made massive steps and massive headway into normalising or destigmatising mental health, but we've such a long way to go. I guess coinciding with that is, the services, the lack of services. Now that we're beginning to speak, the services are so much so far behind. I've chatted away to people that they've on a couple of months waiting list, and I was lucky enough that I was given the support by the Gaelic Players Association that I could get into St Patrick's Mental Hospital. But that's a hugely financial burden on a lot of families, and a lot that we wouldn't as a family be able to head. So I was lucky that I had the support there, and it shouldn't be a thing of like, people break their leg or and they go into hospital and get the treatment straight away. In my head, you've a broken mind. Why shouldn't that be on the even keel of, you go in and see on that day what is exactly wrong with you, So in terms of funding and whatever else the government needs to be doing to put it on that even keel of, a generic hospital where people go in and when a flus or broken leg, as I said, it needs to be on that. And those are a couple of the changes, I guess, that needs to be done. And I was kind of brainstorming about this the last while and chatting away to people. I was thinking, when I was back in school, in the middle of fifth year, I was then, thinking back, what was I doing in fourth year? A lot of people do fourth year. It's a great year in terms of like, de-stressing after the junior cert and having a bit of an easier time of it. But you're going off to Glendalough, you're going off and doing all these trips and whatnot. And I was thinking, why don't we have an education workshop there around mental health? It's going to be, you're coming into massive changes where people are going to be going into fifth and sixth year, massive, in their head, massive decisions to make in their life. Where are they going to college? What are they doing after? And it's a massive, massive stressful environment, I would guess. And why aren't we educating people, I would say, in secondary school around the subject of mental health? We do geography, history, Irish, whatever else it may be. Why can't we have the subject of mental health and educate people? They may not need it at that particular time in their life, but they may need it a couple of years down the line. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that, doing that module or whatever it may be. And they have the tools there for when it does come to a head, that they can deal with it there and then. So those are the couple of things that I would say that would need to be changed, I guess.
Because definitely if you had have had the knowledge to know kind of what depression is, you might have recognised it earlier in yourself, I guess. Do you think that is kind of down to anything in particular, or?
I guess we could go back to even the thing of like social media is a massive thing, and I think everyone would agree upon there's so much pressure that, in terms of, as I said, I post on social media because I know it's a massive platform that everyone uses, but it also can come across as a negative in terms of, people posting up pictures of this one snapshot of their life where they are and perceived to be living this idyllic life. And it's anything but people seeing this one snapshot picture who may be going through a difficult time are thinking, why aren't I as happy as them? Why aren't I away on holidays? Or why aren't I there? And why aren't I feeling this sort of way? And, beating themselves up. So I guess that could be a contributing factor to the depression, anxiety, rising levels in the country. And, it would be a massive thing of obviously the youth of today. I'm not only talking about the youth, but in general, where we're coming from a social media platform. I guess we need to maybe educate people around that in terms of how to actually deal with, trolls, you would say, on social media, and ignoring that kind of filtered stuff, that it's not reality. It is not reality. And getting your head around this life you're living and put it into perspective. You have a family, friends, whatever it may be, a lot of positive. You don't need to take that one snapshot picture and think everything else around my life is going downward.
And what was it that encouraged you kind of first to start speaking publicly and doing public talks and interviews and that kind of thing?
I guess it was the fact that, as I said, this pedestal-like figure that I wouldn't have liked to see myself on, that I then realised in hospital, the positive effect that I have or could have on people. Whatever I say or do on social media or publicly, whatever it may be, it has an effect further afield than I really do think. And stemming from the first public speaking event, that I was very, very nervous for. I was apprehensive putting my story out there in a bigger platform, and it was just, I guess, from the reception that I got from it. And as I mean it in a nice possible way, I got a massive buzz for people coming up to me and saying, you've made a massive change in my life. You've made me a lot more comfortable about thinking of speaking up, and I thought I was the only one going through it, and a lot of things you said resonated with me. And from a selfish point of view, I guess, I would have loved to have that way back in 2011, 2012, 2013, when everything was going on for me for those couple of years. And I guess I'm trying to be that, illuminating a path for people, that there is hope, there is a way out. This is the path that I've taken, and you can take that too, So I guess from that point of view, I've been very, very proud in coming out publicly, and will continue to do so.
And the feeling that you get that buzz, is it a different feeling to when you would have won kind of GAA matches? Is it a different kind of feeling?
Yeah, it is. It was, you know, with the Gaelic matches or whatever else, I guess it's a euphoric feeling. It is a buzz. It's hard to I guess explain. I would say the buzz that I feel with that people get from my talks or whatever it may be is knowing the path that they could potentially be on now when they begin to speak up, and you know, visualizing that path that they may be on with the matches. It's the there and then. It's the what I've trained so hard for the, you know, last 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it may be, for a penultimate game. But I guess they are on different levels, but with the same feeling, I guess.
And I've seen as well that you're an ambassador for Pieta House.
Yes.
And how's that?
It's fantastic. You know, the people at Pieta House, obviously, they're well known around the country for the amount of work that they do, and it's a thankless task. And only, you know, when I've been in with them this past year, I've seen the background kind of work that's been done, and it's absolutely incredible. And you know, for me to be asked to be an ambassador, and it was a hugely proud moment. You know, as I said, I'm thankfully out the other side. As I said, I still have my good and bad days, so I can resonate with people a lot more now that I've educated myself around the subject. So to be an ambassador for Pieta House and to be given that platform to speak out publicly about my experiences has been hugely, I would say, humbling over the last kind of 6-7 months as I've been with them.
And if you were to give advice to someone who is struggling, maybe confused, they don't really know what's going on, and they're afraid to talk, what kind of advice would you give to someone?
I would actually say, you know, they're afraid to talk. I would say talk, you know, and the thing is, when I say talk, it's not about telling your whole story. And that's the thing for me. If I strip it back to where I actually came from, was actually sitting down with my mum and dad in a flood of tears, and I said, look, I'm not going through a very good time here. And I didn't tell them a whole story. You know, I didn't have to. And it was a thing of, that was my stepping stone to rebuilding my life, where I just said, look, I'm going through a difficult time, and everything that had transpired from there has been absolutely fantastic. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that, you know, the path that I've taken, even though it's been bumpy, as it always will be, and I won't shy away from the fact that it will be, but I'm so glad I took that step. You know, if I look back to my story, I wish I'd have spoken up sooner, because I can see that path. I'm out the other side, and I'm saying to people, whether it be your mum and dad, whether it be your best friend, or your coach or teacher, whoever it may be, whoever you can confide in and feel comfortable with, just saying something, just a small word, that can illuminate the path for you to continue on, or to begin, I guess, a more fulfilling life than they are at this present moment in time. And
what is in your future at the moment? What's happening in the next kind of year or so?
In the next year, next month, I'm actually going to do a master's in DCU. I'm studying business management, just a year long, and at the minute I'm about 6 months through writing a book.
Oh, unreal.
Yeah, I've actually teamed up with, stemming from my blog, O'Brien's Publishers got onto me about 6 or 7 months ago on the idea of writing a book around my whole story. And you know, at the thought of that, you know, thinking when I posted that blog, the last thing in my head was that I was going to be writing a book, you know. So I'm about 6 months through that. I'm hoping to be finished, all said and done, by about November, and I'm hoping then for it to be released maybe April 16th. The reason why April 16th would be, it would mark 6 years to the day since I went into hospital. So for me, that would be a hugely humbling experience to think, you know, 6 years ago I was at the deepest and darkest point of my life, and 6 years on I've released a book that will hopefully you know, help so much more people in this country and further afield than that. So that's essentially where I'm at. And even sporting wise, I'm away from Dublin senior football at this particular moment. I'm trying harder than ever, and I'm hoping to get that call back if and when it comes in January. So I'm 24, I'm young, I'm hungry, and I'm ready to go at the next year and beyond.
Excellent. That all sounds really exciting.
Thank you very much.
We want to thank Shane for sharing his story and for playing a role in the conversations surrounding mental health illnesses. It's extremely important that we start this discussion and we continue it. Thanks so much for listening to Zevo Talks, and tune in next time.